Okay, it's 11:05, so we need to start because it's quite a packed hour and a half. Welcome, everybody, people in person and those who are online. My name is Richard Bearsworth. I'm Professor of International Relations and Head of the School of Politics and International Studies, and I'll be chairing this discussion among the four panelists behind me today. So welcome to this event, Regional Collaboration for Climate Action, a leadership discussion at the University of Leeds in West Yorkshire. This event is bringing together key regional voices, and I wish to underline that, to discuss climate action in West Yorkshire and its surrounds, and the importance of collaboration, collaborative action, and I think increasingly we might use the term coordination to do this. It aims to highlight in particular both the role of research and education institutions and the role of partnerships among research, education, and the policy world to drive climate ambition, innovation, engagement, and impact. It's a lot of words, but I think we all know what that means. Let me welcome our distinguished panelists, and I'm going to stand out the way of Tracy. Mayor Tracy Brabin, the first Mayor of West Yorkshire since the office was established in May 2021. She was previously the Member of Parliament for Batley and Span from 2016 to 2021 under the Labour and Cooperative banner, and prior to that was an actress and television writer. Approved by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, Tracy launched the West Yorkshire Climate and Environment Plan for Action 21 to 24 in October 2021, and I'm sure she'll be returning to that. Tracy, welcome to the University of Leeds. Vice-Chancellor Simone Buitendijk has been Vice-Chancellor of the University of Leeds since September 2020. Previously, she was Vice Provost for Education at Imperial College London and Vice Rector at Leiden University, where she also held the first chair in the Netherlands, I understand, in primary care obstetrics. The University of Leeds Climate Plan was developed and approved in November 2021 under her leadership. Simone, it is a great pleasure to have you among us. Professor Andy Gouldson is Professor of Environmental Policy at the University of Leeds, and he focuses on climate resilient development at local and regional scales. Andy is founder and chair of the Leeds Climate Commission and, perhaps most importantly here, the director of Yorkshire and Humberside Climate Commission, where the climate action plan that involved more than 500 stakeholders was published in November 2021. And last but not least, Professor Piers Forster is Professor of Climate Physics at the University of Leeds and is founding director of the Priestley International Centre for Climate, a unique institution at the University of Leeds that brings together world-leading interdisciplinary expertise in climate research and provides timely responses, indeed solutions, to the climate emergency. Piers is also a member of the UK Climate Change Committee and has been and will be on many climate plans. So that is our panel. Given the time, I'm going to skip some other introductory words because I want to get to the four panelists as quickly as possible. The order of the morning. Each of the panelists now has 5 minutes to discuss their office's role in leading on climate ambition for the region. For example, the role research institutions can play, the importance of collaboration among local regional authorities and among leaders and partners, including yourselves in the audience, at society as a whole. We will then have 35 minutes discussion among the four around the points that are of interest, and we'll push them forward. And my role as chair is simply to steer the conversation. I want very much the four to be discussing among themselves. Then there'll be 25 minutes of questions, which I already have from the audience, which have been submitted in advance. And if we do have any time, it's obviously important for a deliberative environment, to take questions also from the floor. And I will then close the discussion, and there will continue to be refreshments. So that's the order of the day. Let's begin immediately. And Tracy, could I hand over to you?
Lovely, thank you. And what an amazing building, and it's such a privilege to be here. Thank you all for coming out to discuss what is an urgent crisis for us as a nation, as the world, and also as a region. And thank you, Simone, for hosting us today. So we all know why we're here, because we're facing the worst crisis in a generation, and never before have so many people been so worried about the climate emergency and energy and the basic needs of their family. Worried about putting on the heating, worried about putting a hot meal on the table, worried about, do they put on the dry their clothes, how do they get through the day? At the heart of this escalating crisis is a failure of us as political leaders to actually tackle the climate emergency, and a failure to invest in renewables when we had the chance, in our transport networks and in upskilling people. But here in West Yorkshire, we have a unique opportunity, actually. With devolution, we can forge our own path, and working with government as best we can, given the chaos, working with government, trying to make the case that we can help government hit their targets if they work with us. Now, most of you will know that as a combined authority, we made the commitment to zero carbon by 2038 at the latest. And our climate and environment plan sets out those actions that we are going to take to hit that target. But I'm going to be really frank with you that as it stands with the technology, we are only four-fifths of the way there. And that's why what's really important today is the collaboration with you, with people on this panel, because we cannot do this on our own. We need academia. We need research institutions, so vital to the success of our plan. What I want to do as your mayor is I want to make sure in West Yorkshire we have homes that are well insulated. We know we have a poor housing stock that is drafty, that is really hard to keep warm. We need to make sure insulation is a priority with low and local cost green energy networks served by a transport network that's zero carbon and affordable and reliable, and where people can enjoy really rewarding, well-paid careers. So as a region, I am incredibly inspired by the potential we've got. We are home to the youngest city in Europe, Bradford. We have one of the highest concentrations of higher and advanced learning facilities in the UK, and such a wealth of diversity in terms of our people, our landscapes, and of course our culture. Now, a year ago, I was in Glasgow at COP26, speaking to mayors and leaders from around the world about the solutions to the global climate crisis and how they can be found locally, and how mayors can be the tugboats pushing government into the right position. As leaders in our respective fields, all those mayors understood where interventions were needed, where targeted investment can make a difference, because the journey to net zero must be a fair and just and sustainable transition. Now, we know statistically the most disadvantaged communities can be disproportionately affected by changing climate. People in West Yorkshire already hit harder by the current cost of living crisis than anywhere else in the UK. And you will know the stories are heartbreaking. You'll have heard them on TV, maybe your friends and family. My inbox is full of heartrending stories of people who are being pushed not just from poverty, but into penury, into potential homelessness because of the climate crisis. 1 in 3 households in our region has no disposable income after paying their energy bills. Our houses, as I've said, are less well insulated. So despite the government's intervention, 30% of households in our region currently are in fuel poverty. 26% of people in West Yorkshire have low or no qualifications, which means they're not fulfilling their potential, stuck in unrewarding, unstable, low-paid jobs. I am going to change that because this is an opportunity, tackling the climate emergency, to create good, well-paid jobs for young people across our region. We can forge our own path and go further and faster than this UK government. And we have huge ambition and, of course, a wealth of world-leading expertise here in this university and more widely. So this is my challenge to you, to hold us to account, but also to help us find those solutions. Because we need to harness this energy into meaningful action. We need to identify, where are the barriers? What can I do to help remove those barriers? What are the interventions that are going to have the most impact? So I'm really excited to hear about my colleagues on the panel, but also from you about what more can be done. So thank you. We know it's urgent. I'm so glad you came today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for these wonderful words. And I think we're lucky at the University of Leeds to have you as the first mayor of this region. I know we talked before you were elected, and it was such an energizing discussion, and I was really hoping you would make it, and you did. And I think we've worked together really well in these last, a year and a half now since you've been in post. And I think collaboration really is at the heart of all of this. And I'm very pleased that the University of Leeds is able to play its part in this global, national, and we're talking today about regional issue that we can only solve if we're working together. So the university strategy, our new 10-year strategy, is called Universal Values, Global Change. And the Sustainable Development Goals, the global challenges, really are at the heart of everything we're trying to achieve. And the foundations were already in place before I came, because obviously it's not me who's doing this. It's really working with everybody who is studying at our university, who's researching at our university. But we need to take it to the next level, and we have absolutely no time to waste. And I think if we look at all the global challenges, and clearly climate change is the most pressing one of our time, I think universities are superbly placed to change them all, to make a super positive impact on all global challenges. But we can't do it alone. We need to work together across the globe with colleagues in the Global South, also colleagues in the region. And the reason we're so superbly placed is that we do amazing research, really cutting-edge research that can get at the heart of sustainable solutions. But for me, most importantly, and maybe it betrays the fact that I was in student education roles before, we are the place where the next generation is being trained. And if there's ever a topic where it's so clear we need to work with young people, it is climate change. Clearly, you're much more worried about your future, which is longer than mine. You're much more aware of what's happening. You see solutions where people in my generation don't see them as readily. And for the University of Leeds to also take their education role really seriously, and not just from the research-led perspective, but also working with students, listening to students, making sure that they feel their voices are being heard, truly partnering with them. And that's part of our strategy. We're going to reform our curriculum, make sure that we're really working with students on what they need in their education. Another reason the University of Leeds is so well placed to make a big impact is that we're really multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, if you will. We're a comprehensive university, and we all know that none of these issues, and especially not climate change issues, can be solved only with technical solutions. We need people from the arts, humanities, who understand culture. Even in the statistics you mentioned, Tracy, it's so obvious if we don't think about how to tackle poverty, how to work with people's lived experience from a social sciences perspective, from an economy perspective, from the perspective of opportunities, we won't be able to solve this crisis. So I think it's only right that the University of Leeds will focus on climate issues in its strategy in the next 10 years, and it's really going to be one of our major focus of our strategy. And we're so lucky of having these wonderful researchers. It's not just Piers and Andy, of course, are the figureheads, but we have a huge group of people who can help us do this well. And working together in the region on actual people's lived experiences, I think is so exciting, because that's really what universities are about. And we sometimes forget about that a bit. We're so competitive with each other. So we have new values also at the University of Leeds to guide us through our strategy, to focus us on what's really important. And I'm really proud of them. They were crowdsourced. We did them together. And their collaboration, compassion, inclusivity, and integrity. And I think we need all those 4 values to do all the work together that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really proud that this is what the University of Leeds has embraced so far. So we're a world leader in climate and atmospheric science and the education that comes with it. And we want to support climate mitigation and adaptation locally, nationally, and globally. And I think local and global really are the two spheres that research-intensive universities work in. So I think this is a brilliant meeting to have today. So we're at the forefront, I think, of enabling civic participation, enabling participation of everybody whose lives are being impacted. And we have our climate principles commitment. I'll say a bit more about that in a second. And of course, we support the work of the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission, which is going to be absolutely vital in driving all this work forward. So I think you already mentioned it earlier, the 7 principles that we adopted in 2019, but then maybe more importantly, in 2021, we drafted our climate plan, and we're going to make the biggest investment in the history of the university ever, 174 million in the next 10 years, to work with the region, to do our civic work, but also get our own house in order, sometimes even literally, because our campus too needs improvements, and we need to do the things that we're going to help everybody else doing, also in our own home. So our climate plan covers 7 areas, delivering net zero by 2030, and I think we're well underway. Supporting Leeds as a net zero city, delivering sustainable travel, academics travel a lot, students travel, and we need to think about doing that more sustainably. Shaping institutional decision making, a lot of this we need to look at also in how we take structural institutional decisions, and that's where I also feel my own role. That's really, really important in this. Refocus our research and our education to make sure that we teach what we want to achieve. So we want to produce a sustainable curriculum, give students what they're asking us, give them the multidisciplinary teaching so they can hit the ground running after graduation and can really help change the world. And we need to also enable responsible investment. And I think if we do all of this, we can truly say we're at the forefront in higher education sectors of everything that needs doing. So I'm really proud of our position in the city, in the region, of our collaboration, of the work we're already doing, the foundations that were in place when I came, and the willingness and the eagerness of our entire community to go to the next phase, and of course beyond, because even if we do everything we're now planning, I'm sure while we're doing it, we probably realize we need to step it up even further, and we can only do that if we work with everybody. So let me stop here, Richard, and hand over to our experts who know much more than I do about how we're actually going to do this.
Thank you very much. I'm Andy Gouldson. I'm a professor of environmental policy here at the University of Leeds. Some years ago, I was involved in helping to draft the civic and regional engagement strategy for the university, and one of the key themes in that was how we wanted to be a university without boundaries, so that it was easier for the university to reach out into the city, into the region, and have an impact, but also easier for people from outside the university to come in and engage with the university and shape its activities. Half my time at the moment, I'm seconded to the UK Infrastructure Bank, which is based in Leeds, has £24 billion to invest in net zero. And that's one example of the university kind of seconding some of us out to get involved in these nitty-gritty areas. The other half, I'm very proud to be the co-director of the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission, which is hosted here in the university and supported very directly through the climate principles, activities and investment that Simone mentioned. So the Yorkshire and Humber Commission is a regional body set up to draw actors from the government, from local authorities, combined authorities, and all of the public agencies, including the Environment Agency and Natural England and so on, the NHS, Together with businesses, many of our largest businesses in the region, Yorkshire Water, Northern Power Grid, and so on, are part of that commission, together with third sector groups and communities. And the whole aim of the commission is to build those collaborative capacities for practical action on climate change. We have 4 aims as a commission. One is around net zero and building capacity to deliver on the 2038 net zero target. The second is around climate resilience, and you only have to look at the region and our rivers. Do you want to switch to this? Okay. Sorry, are we going to switch to this instead of that? Okay, perfect. So climate resilience is obviously such a massive issue for the region. The flood forecasts for the Humber estuary are quite terrifying. We look at so many issues, including the drought over the summer, fears of wildfires, and so on, which are affecting us in the here and now. We also have nature recovery as a target for the region, and nature plays a key role in our response to climate change, but also in so many other areas of life in the region. And then lastly, we have a target or a priority to promote a just and inclusive transition, so that this is done in a fair and inclusive way that takes people and communities with us, rather than it being done to us from outside, as it were. So it has to be done, by and for the region rather than to the region. Why is collaboration so important in all of this? Well, we have 22 local and combined authorities across the region. We actually have 800 or more parish and town councils. So we have a kind of governance landscape which is quite fragmented and quite diverse. We don't have regional government. We did have some of that until 10 or 12 years ago. But the absence of a regional layer is an issue for a number of reasons. One is Yorkshire's population is 5.5 million people. It's the same roughly as Scotland. And our carbon footprint is bigger than 8 EU member states. And yet we don't have a regional body to coordinate what we do about that. Many of our rivers work across political boundaries. Many of our people obviously travel across those political boundaries. And there's so much to be gained from collaboration and capacity building and shared endeavour on climate change. But there's a bit of a vacuum in that space. So the Commission was set up in a way to build some extra capacity and bring people together in a constructive way around climate action at the regional scale. Some of the highlights of why this is so important have really come to the fore in the last few days. Just yesterday, we were looking at the carbon footprint of the region and what's happening at the regional scale. And one of the things that came out of that is a recalibration of our energy bill as a region, given the energy price spikes. And we were somewhat stunned to realise that the total energy bill for Yorkshire and Humber is £30 billion a year. So that's £30 billion, which could be staying in our region, creating well-being, creating equity, addressing poverty, creating jobs, creating prosperity in other ways, which is leaking out of our region, paying for an energy bill which we are going to struggle to pay with. And when we look at the fuel poverty numbers, 70% of households in Yorkshire and Humber are forecast to be in fuel poverty in January this coming year. That is a shocking, shocking statistic. And yet, there are things we could be doing about this which are good for everyone, good for our households, good for social inclusion and for public health, good for job creation, good for climate. And yet, we're not doing many of those things at the pace and scale which is required. So, for example, we think we could save £13 billion a year off that regional energy bill by investing in energy efficiency, in renewables, in things which have those social benefits, which would unclog our NHS and our wards with people who unfortunately will have flu this year because of fuel poverty, would create jobs, would stimulate our economy and help us to reach those carbon targets. But that needs joined up thinking, and it needs innovation, and it needs everyone to come together and work in a joined up way. And yet we don't do enough of that, and hence the role of the Commission to plug those gaps and work on those kind of capacity building issues. The Commission last year, at the time of COP26 in Glasgow, published a climate action plan. It has 50 key points that we should be prioritising as a region. At the moment, we are working on the next layer down from that, as it were, saying, well, okay, these are broad action points. We know we need a massive retrofit scheme, for example, but how do we actually get more traction and get things moving? In a very challenging policy context nationally, how do we not wait for national government to take the lead, but instead show what we can do as a region, and then hopefully the region can set the direction and the pace of national policy, rather than us waiting for something which, frankly, we know isn't going to happen under this government at least. So these consultations, which started last week and are carrying on for the next year or so, are all aiming towards 2024, when we as a Commission will publish a State of the Region report with detailed actions and a kind of checklist on how we're doing. There are many, many examples where, as a region, we're doing amazing things in this area, but there are also some statistics which say and remind us we need to double and redouble our efforts. So again, going back to the carbon statistics from yesterday, it seems the region is decarbonising at somewhere between 3 and 4% a year, which isn't bad progress in some ways, but in order to get to our target by 2038, we need to be achieving more than 10 or roughly 11% a year. So, you know, there are some things which are happening which haven't fed through into those numbers yet, and, you know, momentum is being built, undoubtedly, but it's a good reminder that we need to double and redouble our efforts to achieve those targets, not only on net zero, same for climate resilience, same for nature recovery, same for just transition, which is what the Commission is here to do. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, it's fantastic to be here today. I'll try and not talk for too much time, Richard. So I do kind of principally want to talk about my job for the UK government, where I sit on the government kind of climate change committee. And I think we've been successful as a committee in really getting successive governments to really sign up to very ambitious emission reduction targets. So we have the net zero 2050 target, of course, but we also have an interim kind of targets with a kind of 78% reduction by 2035. But one interesting thing we've done on our committee is for this, we spent the last 12 month time touring the country to visit various cities and local authorities, and I would really encourage you, if you're interested, to go and look at the report on our committee's website, and it's called kind of Climate Conversations. And it's really interesting. We went to cities like Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, but we also went to some kind of rural authorities as well, like County Durham. And the first thing is, there is lots of ambition out there throughout the kind of country. These local authorities are working to the best of their abilities, apart from perhaps kind of Somerset that care more about kind of cows and kind of cars. But nearly everyone else we talk to are really kind of passionate about trying to deliver net zero within their communities. But they aren't getting the support from government. They're also having to kind of reinvent the kind of wheel each kind of time. They're spending a fortune on consultants, and the consultants do the same thing for each local authority. And these really good ideas aren't being effectively kind of shared. So the first thing I've got to really talk about is that we have to go from collaboration, where we try our best, to really coordinated action. And just as you all talked about, we do need kind of something in between central government and the local authorities to really try and deliver that joined-up coordination. So we talk about the net zero delivery kind of framework. I couldn't say the word. I'll try again. So net zero delivery kind of framework. But to really make that deliver effectively, it has to be kind of co-designed by the local authorities. It can't be just a top-down thing from the central government. The local authority really need input into the way that works. It also needs adequate kind of resourcing and kind of funding. The kind of funding that local authorities get currently, they have to compete with each other. So the City of Leeds compete with Birmingham for the kind of grants they do get, and they have their own delivery pathways, but they have to compete for whatever the government want to give them the kind of funding for a particular grant. But the government and the kind of funding they give has to really support the kind of longer term need of the local authorities. And what it has to do, it has to get from the ambition they've got into really delivering urgent action as fast as possible. So, for example, this winter, we really need to urgently do lots of communication and engagement, because there are people things to do. People can change their diets, they can get off their cars and ride kind of bicycles rather than drive, they can change the boiler kind of settings they've got to reduce their energy bills. So the immediate things the people can do that the government is refusing to communicate. So the local authority to have a role, and I think kind of we have a role as an academic institution to really try and kind of support that communication and engagement. And the other thing is there has to be good facilitation as well, because there are different parts of each local authority. Some are rich, some are poor, they have different needs, different backgrounds, different diversity and different things. So there has to be some facilitation to try and get the right kind of solutions into the right locations as urgently as we possibly can do. And the last thing, of course, we have to be very flexible. We have to really learn by doing. We have to invest in the kind of training and the skills of our young people today, and we have to join up with other institutions in the City of Leeds. We have to work better with University down the road, of course, but we have to learn, we have to work with all the other educational establishments to really try and kind of train the people of tomorrow. We need people to fit our air source heat pumps, to retrofit our buildings, but to also really try and design the exciting technologies and the interventions and all the way the society should be different and looking kind of 30 years time. Okay, so we all have to try and get from, we have to be coordinated, not just collaborative, and we don't just think about being as ambitious as we possibly can be, think about what we can do kind of today and tomorrow and the day after to put in the actions to really get the change we all want.
Many thanks to, it's working? Good. Many thanks to the four of you. We have 25 minutes so we can keep on schedule and make sure there are questions and answers. So basically, I'd first like to ask the four of you, do you have any observations to make on each other's comments?
I would say that collaboration is the key, and it's so great that we're here because everyone's talking about how do we get going now and get, have these great plans. There's no point having a plan unless then you can implement it. and have the money to resource it and deliver on the ground. So I'm so glad we're here, because there'll be greater collaborations come out of this.
Shall I follow on?
Simone, follow on.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with what you were saying, Tracy, and all the statistics that you showed about the real people's levels of poverty and the pressing issues that they face in their daily lives. So thank you for bringing that to the fore so clearly. What I really loved about, well, I think your presentation was wonderful too, to show how much we're doing in the region and nationally, and how involved we are with the civic society. That makes me really proud. And I like the collaboration, but not just that, but also coordination. And I'm going to shamelessly use that, Piers, in many of the presentations I'll be giving in the next few months. Because it's not just about collaboration, it really is about being strategic, having a vision, having a plan, measuring against targets and all of that. And we often forget about those kinds of things. So I think it's really clear that we have so much that we can work together on. And if we do it in a coordinated way, I think we have a good chance to actually make a real difference in real people's lives.
If I could just jump in and say, being an elected politician, I have a pressing need to also deliver in the next 18 months on my commitment to tackling the climate emergency. So it does focus your mind when you're an elected politician.
Andy?
I think we need leadership. We really, really need visionary, determined, ambitious leadership on climate change. And to qualify for a Brown Nose Award, you've done brilliantly on this, and it's front and centre of what you've been doing at the West Yorkshire level. And clearly we need delivery, and that needs capacity and it needs finance and so on. But it needs social buy-in, and it needs a social license for change, and people need to feel that this is relevant to their daily lives. And many people have much more pressing priorities. Us climate folk like to think that everybody's fully bought into this, but we have to accept that perhaps not everybody is completely on board or giving it the priority that some of us would like to see. So it has to be integrated into social policy and into education, into health and transport and housing and all of those other areas. And I think what you've been doing in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority is really showing the way in how to integrate it and mainstream climate change so that it becomes relevant and is delivered through all the other things that we do, as well as through climate policy. And to extend that, I think the university's commitment and the climate principles is genuinely sector leading, and it makes it so much easier for the Yorkshire and Humber Commission to stand up and say to other people, what are you doing in this area? How do you really prioritise this and go at it with ambition? When we can say, well, look at what the University of Leeds has been doing, and that £174 million, has a massive impact in signalling to other people that you should be copying that. Clearly we need to again follow through, and we need to think about how best to spend that money and invest that money on the campus and in terms of enabling other activities. But it really does help us to get other people on board as well. So.
Yes, Simone and then Piers.
Yeah, I think what's really important from the university perspective is that we help with evidence-based policy. That's been my pet peeve ever since I started my career as a researcher. We do so many things that aren't evidence-based. And with climate, we have no time to waste. We can't waste money, we can't waste energy. So we need to make sure, our own personal energy, and also the energy that we're spending to just heat homes. So to do things in an evidence-based way and work with people who are elected politicians to make sure that they actually know what policies are going to be most effective at what scale. That's where I see the university's role, and of course also in training students. But they too need to start thinking in an evidence-based way, because a lot of things we're doing as a society in all these pressing issues, they're well-meaning and they're well-intentioned and they may look good at face value, but if we don't monitor what the effects are, if we don't do the scholarly work, we won't be able to lead, and we also will be wasting a lot of time and energy, literally and figuratively.
Fantastic, but perhaps I'm going to ask a question to Tracy. That do you want us to give you any more kind of support? I mean, I do really think the Piers academics aren't really getting out of our ivory towers, and we aren't really engaging enough that we should be kind of within our own community. And we don't have enough people at our institution that come from the diverse backgrounds within our communities. So I do wonder, is there anything in particular that you want from us that you think we aren't currently kind of delivering, or we could do a bit better?
That's a really great offer, thank you. Whilst we do have very many smart people at the Combined Authority that have helped me with my climate and environment plan and how we spend our 40 million that we've allocated for it till 2024, one of the biggest challenges is identifying carbon. And when an infrastructure project comes to us, what's the carbon impact of this particular project? And that's a piece of work that I think we could maybe do with more support on, because this is also about supporting our local authority partners. It's very technical, it's very detailed, it's quite academic, and that we get projects all the time. What's the road project that will then have buses, electric buses on it? What's the carbon impact of that versus the offset of the fact that we're getting more people out of their cars and onto the buses, and those buses are electric? It is a very complicated picture. So there's definitely one thing there that would be able to help us, but also green finance. This is an area that I don't think anybody's really solved. How can big corporations like Aviva or the big insurers or the pension pots, how can they find investable projects that then will give them a return for their money? There's the patient finance is out there, but how patient are they? And so that support around green finance would also be particularly welcome.
Perhaps I can quickly come back to that. I think that sounds fantastic, but I think we can go a bit further, perhaps academia as well, and it gets back to Simone's topic about really trying to be interdisciplinary, that perhaps you're mostly concerned with your kind of carbon accounting, but perhaps we can also come in and support what are the additional co-benefits that project might contribute to the NHS or to the air quality or to other things within the society. So I think we as a community are really actively quite involved in trying to look at things from lots of different perspectives, and perhaps some of them you haven't really thought about before.
No, that's really a brilliant offer, thank you. And there is a joy about being the mayor, because my responsibilities are many and various. So, for example, being able to commit to 5,000 affordable, sustainable homes. The climate targets are there. I'm determined that we have affordable homes, but also we look to the future as well. My culture committee, it's the first time we've had a culture committee. We have partners on that committee that are looking at how we green film production and high-end TV. So everything that we're doing, when we're looking at transport, I'm able to slash bus fares to £2, and I hope everybody came by bus to this meeting, to £2, and the 450 day saver, to get that modal shift to try and persuade people to get onto buses. And that's the transport arm of my responsibilities. And being able to then, with the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, identify where we can buy electric buses. And I'm very proud that we have the UK's first ever fully solar-powered park and ride in the UK at Sturton with electric vehicles. Every element, and whether that's, as I say, housing or culture or police and crime, I am able to keep that front and centre of my mind, but maybe there will be an opportunity to go further and faster in each department. Thank you.
Great. One of the things I'm hearing a lot in what you're saying, and actually I'll use the words that I think you used, Tracy, is a sense of the region has got to find its own way. We're obviously at a moment where there is a political vacuum nationally. That may continue, it may not. And one may wait for a change of government where things could change direction. But this sense that the region is not necessarily on its own, but it wants to find its own way, because as Andy also said, it's critical that things come up from the bottom. Where are the gaps here? What are the gaps that we need to fill in a collaborative exercise?
It feels that we need clarity from government. I mean, we're not going to get that in the next 18 months, I don't think, about the direction of travel for their commitment to whether it's hydrogen, whether it's electric. I've got gas fitters, for example, companies that fit boilers saying, you know, we have more work than we can deal with at the moment. Why should we retrain in retrofit? Because we don't know where government's money is going to go. We do need that clarity. And I also do think we had an opportunity when we're talking about growth. This is a fantastic growth sector that we could, if we committed to tackling the climate emergency with renewables to make us independent of Putin and others around the world, we could make West Yorkshire in particular an outlier. And we could be a petri dish for the whole of the country to say we're investing in jobs and skills. And that's why my Green Jobs task force, 1,000 skilled jobs for young people, was set up, where companies that have never spoken to each other are all talking about where are our green jobs. And I'm really pleased 18 months in, we're at 986 at the last count. The Mayor's Innovation Prize, 16 to 26-year-olds. What's your solution to the climate crisis with cash prizes for young people? We have to identify what we can do to reset the agenda. But to your point of what more can be done, I think we need to get people, and this is a unique opportunity because of the energy crisis, to understand if you retrofit, if you get on a bus, if you eat less meat, you will save money. This is an economic argument. If you train in green skills, you will get a job because the companies are there for you. It's a real chance for us to step in where I really think government aren't leading the way. And certainly when they're talking about bringing back fracking and so on, it just does feel like we're going 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. So there's lots of gaps that hopefully local leadership with partners and coordination can try and deliver.
Would any of the three of you like to come back on that question of gaps?
Yeah, I think there are 2 key areas I would single out, one of which is a broad point and one of which is a perhaps rather techie point. The broader point, I think, is around the kind of social license for change. I think us climate folk take it as read that we want to transform our society and our economy and our region. We want to change people's lives and the way they live. And many people absolutely are on board with that and see the relevance of that. But I think we have to admit that many people also don't. It's not front and center for everybody's lives. You know, how do we create this positive vision of what the region, what the city can look like in the future that people get excited about and say, that's what I want for my kids? And you know, I can see why climate action helps us to be a happier, healthier, more vibrant, more prosperous, more inclusive region. So really articulating, and that can only be done in a collaborative, inclusive way, I think. We can't generate a vision for the future without involving people in that process. So, you know, that means engaging, and it means reaching out, and it means being better at listening often to diverse voices in terms of what their concerns are. And some of them, I have to say, are deeply concerned about climate change. And we work a lot with the TUC, they're on the regional commission. And, you know, some of them are working in sectors which are high carbon, which are going to struggle to decarbonize. And we can say, well, you need to get on with it. Or we can say, actually, I recognize that it's a challenge for you and we need to help you to do that. And we need to reassure you that you can be retrained and there will be good quality green jobs for you, you know, on the other side of that. Because unless we do that, unless we really get people on board, then I think, you know, at some point, there will be a kickback, and we've seen it in France with the Gilets jaunes movement and so on. You know, unless people really buy into this and they are kept bought into it in a very active way, then you know, they can turn against you quite quickly and quite easily. On the more techie point, I would say that the thing that is lacking in Leeds is the capacity to develop big projects at scale that can be funded. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, there's loads and loads of projects looking for money, and there's loads and loads of money looking for projects, and somehow they're not connecting. And the missing middle is really about having a program development capacity that can take those ideas and turn them into investable projects, and then unlock the flows of funding that come from that. And obviously UK Infrastructure Bank that I'm kind of seconded to at the moment has a role in that. But even then, you know, it's a case in point that they have 20 odd billion pounds to invest. But are they getting the right kind of proposals in from Leeds and Yorkshire? Maybe not always, actually. Maybe there's more that can be done, and obviously we're working very closely with West Yorkshire Combined Authority to help that. But you know, we're not the only major investor, and I think the university could play a major role, and the Commission could play a major role in building the capacity to turn ideas into fundable programmes at scale.
If I may just say on the UK Infrastructure Bank that we're working with them on mass transit, because that's going to be one of our biggest infrastructure projects for the last few decades. It is a 10-year project. It's a £2 billion project with 200 million from government to get that going, where we've set up the teams. We're underway with there's loads of consultations and there's legal processes. But this is a big infrastructure project that will get people out of their cars, because if anybody's been to Amsterdam or Dublin or Manchester, you know the difference that a tram makes to the sense of a city, and how you don't need to drive anywhere because you've got your tram. And it's a bicycles as well, but it's mass transit not just for Leeds, but it connects to the rest of West Yorkshire as well. So that's the fantastic opportunity to have that strategic vision. And I'm really looking forward to, I don't know when spades will be in the ground, but I am really hoping by at least 2028, if not before.
Okay, I do absolutely agree with what people have talked about, but I'm going to give you two additional caps. The first one is we need a proper net zero test of some kind for every bit of policy, because there's still too many contradictory kind of priorities that people are working to. So you might have to kind of build a new kind of play part at the same time, kind of retrofitting of some kind. So you have to have a kind of net zero test, and you have to make sure that every bit of kind of policy does really kind of fit that. And the other thing is to realise that most of the kind of finances have to come from the kind of private sector. That you have to get the kind of banks and the financial institutions and the kind of pension funds on, and you have to get them to understand the urgency and to give the financing and to make it longer term and to really get their job done. And in fact, not a lot of people have sympathy for the Prime Minister, but perhaps I'm going to be sympathetic for once. Is that basically she wanted to do something, and our kind of financial institutions said, "Oh no, you can't. You know, you have to do it differently." And that just tells us, I think, kind of how much control those financial institutions have got over our economy and what they want to do. So we have to get them on board, and they have to work for us rather than we work for them.
Yes, can I come back to you on something slightly else, but which is linked, which is when you were talking earlier from the national level, you were comparing sort of Leeds with Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester. And it goes to Andy's point about bringing people on board, so the question of social license. How do we bring more diversity, both socially and ethnically, into climate action at the regional level? Do you have any...
Well, I just give you one anecdote. This came from colleagues at Bristol, and they have this fantastic work they do there called the Green and Black Ambassadors, and they're people from the black community. They get given jobs, and their jobs are to run a kind of radio show, and then they get kind of trained up, and then they go on and go back to their community. And that has worked very successfully, really reaching into the community. And they also do the same with disabled people within their community, and they become kind of climate change ambassadors, and they go out and this sort of community license is giving people jobs. So the way that is done is by giving these people jobs, so they are representatives of their own kind of community, and that worked really, really well. But that is only a kind of drop in the ocean, just as you were talking about. You have to get that working. We are so behind on the communication and the engagement that we have to massively get that going, I think.
Simone, can I ask you, leading this institution, communication engagement is coming up a lot. Do you feel that the university can play a larger role in that?
Absolutely, and what's so fascinating about this discussion is that it seems like there's so much we need to do that we're not doing, so you can quickly feel overwhelmed.
Vice Chancellor, you say all the right words, but last week you are continuing to allow oil and gas companies like Shell to come on our campus and recruit our students. So you say that you want to be evidence-based, you say that you want to listen to young people, you say that you care about net zero. How can you do that when you're continuing to allow companies like Shell to be on campus?
I'm not quite sure what you want me to... Sorry?
Simone, do you want to continue with the microphone? So either pick that up, we can come back to it later, or continue with the conversation we were having.
Well, this clearly is an ongoing conversation, and I don't think that I have one yes or no black and white answer here. I'm not quite sure what you want me to say right here. Of course we do. We need lots of policies. We need to take our responsibility in all of this, and the student voice is going to be really important.
Can I have a guarantee from you that you will implement an ethical presidency that stops all relationships with oil, gas, and mining companies? We've already got things against tobacco companies. I think in 2022 we should be stopping companies like Shell coming on our campus.
We are looking into this with our researchers, with students. We are, of course. I wish.
Not part of the just transition. They're complicit in human rights abuses. Shell in the 1980s allowed the Ogoni 9 activists to be murdered by the Nigerian government, funded and colluded with them because they were protesting about their own ecosystems being damaged by that company. This university will stop in a second, but this
you're making your point.
continues to allow the fallacy that we can work with oil and gas companies for a just transition. We know that that's not true. We know that that's a lie sponsored by those companies to stop action. Shell and the other 4 top oil and gas companies have invested £1 billion since the Paris Agreement in climate-related delay and lobbying.
It's really important what you're saying. I hope you'll allow me to keep the conversation going. Do come back later, but I think you made your point. And I think some reactions to you will take some time. But Simone, can I come back to you? Would you like to make any comment on that, or would you like to continue around the question of communication and engagement?
Yeah, I think well said. Thank you very much. Let's continue this conversation. And I think you made your statement very eloquently, so let me thank you for that. I don't think you let me finish, so let's talk about this some other time. Let's talk about community and engagement. One of the issues clearly for the university is to work with local communities, and not just local communities, beyond local communities. We recognize that there's not enough we do in community engagement, and it's actually one of the focal points also of our new curriculum, how we can work with students to take those roles and help them as part of their education to be more engaged with our communities. But it's also part of our research. And we actually have some researchers in the audience whose actually research expertise is community engagement. I'm looking at Yashid Singh there, and raise your hand, Yashid. So one of the things we're doing as a university also in our research priorities is to make sure that we ask the right research questions, that our research is inclusive, that we don't just think about where to publish it, but actually think about which communities are going to benefit from the results. I'm really sorry, I have the microphone in front of my face.
Can the volume be turned up? Yeah, can people hear me? Yeah?
Okay, what I was saying, I can hear myself much more loudly now. Thank you, thanks for alerting me, is that we're working both from a curriculum perspective and a student education perspective and from our research. And of course the combination between the two, because our curriculum is research informed, to think about how we engage with our communities, how we make the community's needs part of our research questions, and how we think about who benefits from the research we're doing. And that also needs to filter into our curriculum, where our students really feel like they're partnering with us, that their lived experiences, it also has huge EDI elements, their lived experiences are an asset. So we want to bring students in from our local communities to help us with the right questions that they want to be able to answer when they graduate. And we know there's a lot of work we need to do there, but it's one of the very important pillars of our strategy.
I lived experiences that last week we went to your careers fair to protest about Shell, and your security guards were in our faces filming us and threatening us with arrest for breaching the peace.
I'm sorry to hear that.
What do you do something about that?
Let's have that discussion somewhere else. It feels like this is not the place. I also really don't like it that she keeps interrupting.
I think a discussion to one side actually could be more effective with regard to what you'd like done. Yeah, I know. I'm fine. I'm dealing with it. I don't think that is the question. Right, the last question I'm going to ask the panel before I go to the audience. There are several questions registered. I'm aware of the time, and then I will throw it out to the audience. There is, as I said at the beginning, a particular order to this event. If you disagree with its arrangement, come and improve it next time. So there will be time for discussion. I'll go very quickly. There's one last question I'd like to ask the panelists, and then I'll throw it out. I will skip some of the questions that have been asked that have been registered so that the floor can respond. I hope that will partly satisfy you. Clearly, you're not going to be fully satisfied. My last question is very much this, is that we've talked about collaboration, but the term coordination has become increasingly important. What I'd like to ask you, is a coordinating agency required for this kind of work? I'm looking at you, Andy, particularly, because that was partly what the Yorkshire Commission was doing, but it was in a sense involving collaboration. Is it the kind of commission that can also coordinate, or is there something else that is needed at the regional level?
So the Commission, to give you some sense of our scale, we have 40 members on the Commission who sit on our main Commission board. And then we have a number of panels, and I think we have well over 100 organisations involved overall. We're supported by Yorkshire Leaders Board, which includes 22 mayoral, combined and local authorities. And we enable collaboration and coordination across all of those bodies to the extent possible. But to also put it in perspective, our budget is less than £200,000 a year. We have, massively valuable contributions from the university that enable us to do much, much more. But we would love to have the capacity to do more. And there is an absolute need for more coordination, not only across layers or across sectors, across geographies or social groups, but also across the different issues. I mean, I think we see the potential for a joined-up approach to net zero and climate resilience and nature recovery and the social agenda around just transitions. And all of those require quite careful coordination to make sure they're properly joined up. At the regional scale, we have this vacuum, frankly, the lack of a governance capacity at that scale. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon under this government, but who knows, there'll be more devolution or regional collaboration possible in the future. But absolutely, there's a need for a bigger, beefier coordination capacity at the regional scale to enable all of these good things to happen and to make sure that we benefit from them in the region.
Tracy, can you help on that, Governor?
Well, yes, we are going to, from this meeting, we were just talking over coffee, that definitely we can work more closely with the Commission, because I'm sure Andy isn't in the market for the Commission just to be a talking shop without those deliverables, without the ability to deliver. And as I've said, I've 18 months to deliver on what we've already got in train, whether that's about housing retrofit, whether that's about training young people, whether that's about making sure we have our electric buses. You know, we have a timeline and a time frame for delivery, but sure, there's much more we can do together.
Great. Okay, we have 20 minutes left. I'm not going to go to the registered questions. My apologies to those who are online. Given my sense of the atmosphere, I think it's important to go out to the floor immediately. So I'm going to take questions, and if the questions, which I don't think will happen, runs out, I will return to some of the registered questions by people who put them in. So I'm looking around. I need a microphone for Claire. Thank you very much. Sir. Please, the microphone.
It's a question about collaboration and coordination, which the panel were just talking about. Here's a question for two of the members of the panel. Andy Gouldson, why does the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission have a director who is also a commissioner who's also a director of Drax Power Station, which is the biggest emitter in Europe? Tracy Brabin, why is it you're still supporting the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport?
Thank you for that question, and that question is in most meetings brought up. You will have seen that, and you know that the expansion has paused. That it's not expanding in the same way. I am a bit disappointed of the fact that it wasn't going to be rebuilt to net zero, to zero carbon. That was their plan. You'll have seen the feedback from people in South Yorkshire who are fighting to retain their airport. I've always been clear and frank with everybody who has asked me this question. I am a mayor for a region with international universities. I think it's important that we have an airport. And I know there are some people who don't want us to have an airport, but then people will travel by car to go to Manchester. I think it's really important that we have a global-facing region, and I'd be surprised, talking to any other mayors, that they wouldn't want an airport, because it brings jobs, investment, a global reach, and of course, hang on if I may, of course there is more to do on emissions, and there is a tension there. There will always be a tension, but the plan for where airports goes is actually a national decision made by government nationally. It is their strategic plan. But I am not a mayor who wants to get rid of our airport, and you all know this, and I don't make you happy because of that. I know I don't, but I'm going to be honest and I'm going to be frank with you, and it has always been my position, and I still stick by that. So it won't make you happy, I know.
Saying get rid of it, but why are you backing the expansion? It's just blah, blah, blah.
In all honesty, you don't have to be so rude. You swearing. There's no need. There's no need. I'm trying to be honest with you. I'm trying to be frank. It is important for us to understand that there will be working people who want to go on holiday and take their family. And I am not going to deny them one holiday a year with their kids. And I'm not going to put them on the motorway to go to Manchester just so I can feel better at night. It is a trade-off, I do understand. And I am very happy to talk in more detail about the specifics and the numbers. Honestly, I would welcome that meeting, because I know a lot of you feel very strongly about this. So let's make that happen. I'm very happy to talk further in more detail.
Right. Andy, there was a, Piers maybe as well. There's a Drax question there as well, and then I'm going to turn it to the next questioner.
Yeah, so on Drax, the Yorkshire Commission was set up to provide a place where diverse organisations can come together to talk about practical action on climate change. And we have it in our terms of reference that the Commission is not a place for lobbying or for marketing or for political grandstanding. It's a place to talk about practical action and get on with it. Now, we have 40 commissioners, one of whom is from Drax, and we are meeting with them, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks' time to follow up on the Panorama programme and some of the concerns that that raises. Completely, understandably invalid concerns, absolutely. But, Drax is a major problem at the moment, in terms of the scale of their carbon emissions, and BECCS is a massively controversial issue. The carbon capture and storage element of it, though, is absolutely crucial to the region's future and us delivering on net zero. And, at the moment, our position is that we therefore should be talking with them. And that may be uncomfortable to some people, but that's our position at the moment. However, we do have this meeting coming up and, there is an ongoing conversation happening in that respect.
No. Okay. Right, the next question, please. Yes, please, those who want to ask a question, can I just see where you are? Okay. So the microphone here. No, gentleman at the front. Thank you, Claire.
Hi there. Yeah, so I studied here, studied mining engineering, actually. And I've just come back from a trip to Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, where I met all the ministers, deputy prime ministers, and we're helping implement a just energy transition plan in those countries. I'm based at Nexus, and I tried to contact each one of your bodies, and I heard nothing. Whereas I'm able to go to, Uzbekistan and speak to the deputy prime minister. So, I understand we've got to step out of our silos. We've got to, get out of our ivory towers. However, we provide vertical integration, complete funding and everything, and it's on your doorstep, and you guys you're missing a trick. And there's a disconnect there. Why is that? Why you're not looking locally? You're not. I can't see why there's a.
What is it you do? What is it you provide?
We provide energy transition and ESG consulting to the oil, gas, and mining industry. So we're helping basically move the energy transition, a just energy transition forward in those countries, and with their entire plan for net zero. But
can I just say apologies that you've not had a reply? And that's it's not good. It's not.
I even offered some of your people free consultancy so we could just help out. But there we are.
Well, that's really generous, thank you. My inbox, I have to say, is completely mad, so apologies. Let me take your details and we'll make sure we can pick up on that. And I'm always at Nexus. I'm surprised I didn't bump into you at Nexus. You could have always grabbed me for a cup of coffee there. But apologies, and let's pick that up.
Yeah.
Same. We'll yeah.
I think it's a lovely invitation, and it'll be played on. Yep. Okay, I'm going to go this side and I'm going to go back. Sir.
I'm Beth, I'm a student. I've come here today because I study politics, and I joined this university because I thought I could make a difference in terms of climate change policy. Since I've joined, I've been here over a year. None of my course is focused on climate change at all, which I think is an integral part of politics. And I just wanted to hear from people at the university, why there's such a disconnect and whether you'll commit to decolonising the curriculum, committing to every department having a climate justice focus, and committing to an ethical careers policy so that we're having a student body that is the future, contributing to what is such an urgent problem and contributing to those solutions.
I should perhaps come back to you as head of the School of Politics, because it's a direct question to me from your student experience. Thank you. We are rolling modules on, it takes a while at this university to roll modules on, given quality assessment. And what your question demands from me is that I accelerate it as quickly as I can. But it's taking place both at undergraduate and graduate level. Very clear modules on climate change, on climate future, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation, and in terms of the just transition. So you've been heard, but I need to accelerate it. Now let's go to the 4 panelists.
Yeah, if I can add, thank you for your comments. Am I audible now in the audience? This is exactly what we're trying to do, and I'm sorry it's taking longer than you were hoping it would take. I wish some of these urgent changes could be implemented as quickly as we all feel they need to be, but this is absolutely an integral part of curriculum redefined. I don't know if you're aware, but we're spending 10 million a year in the next 10 years to completely revamp our student education, but we're just starting to develop the new modules to take them through the quality assessment pipeline. Everything in universities always takes longer than you wish it would, but this, what you're now mentioning, is exactly what we're moving towards. And please, Richard, and just keep talking to students who can keep telling us what they need. I'm really sorry it's taking longer, but what you're asking is what we're going to deliver, absolutely.
May I jump in and say, if you're in your 3rd year and you want to change the world or you want to act on the climate crisis, come and work for the Combined Authority. Please don't leave and go to London or whatever. Please stay in our region. We need your smarts and your passion to make a difference. And on a daily basis, the Combined Authority is doing exactly that. Mm.
And perhaps I would completely agree with you 100%, and I think it's really where we have to kind of change as an institution. We have been talking about adding this to the curriculum and the career thing for quite a long time, kind of 4 years, kind of 5 years sort of thing. And we haven't, it takes time, but we have to be more kind of agile. We have to really kind of change the way we operate as an institution to be more responsive and agile, to be able to provide you with the last 2 years of your course, that training and that kind of careers program that you really want. So I think that is a kind of onus on Simone, myself, and Richard, and Annie, and others to really try and get that for you.
Please come and see me. Okay? Please come. At the front, Harriet.
It's coming.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, just in response to your question, I wanted to say that one of the new teaching initiatives that we are working on is the Climate Futures Masters, which is across your school and School of Earth and Environment, so natural science, social science and political science. I am one of the programme leaders, and I'm also leading on a module on climate justice, and I would really love your input into that, into how we can decolonise it, how we can incorporate student perspectives. I've worked in climate justice for a long time, so I have a lot of ideas, and I've been trying to get more student input into that. It's something that we are facilitating, but a lot of the paperwork has to be in the next 2 weeks, so please come and see me afterwards. I'll have a chat with you today, tomorrow, and anybody else that wants to feed in from a student perspective on climate justice, please come and see me after this meeting.
Right, thank you.
Gentleman, Claire, the gentleman at the back there.
At the risk of returning to the airport, I think what's important is, and I completely sympathise with the Mayor's position on this, in that on all of these issues, there's a need to bring everyone along with us. And so there is a certain need for some pragmatism. And I think as important as a climate emergency is to me, it's important that we communicate it well. And I think the airport is a really sort of typical issue in terms of that. And I think what we need to respond to is the fact that the airport expansion or not, or otherwise, is a response to demand. So what we need to think about is how as organisations we can make changes to actually manage that demand. And I think one example of that is talking about academia and the reliance the academic processes and learning has on international travel. And so I think it's important that we look at actually where the frequent flyers are, and because that's where the real impact's coming from, as opposed to those families having one holiday a year. And I wonder, as an example from a university and perhaps more broadly, how we can look to communicate these issues and make people aware of the impacts they're having, not just flights, eating meat, how they travel, active travel, and so on. And I think coming back to that issue we had talked about earlier, communication, but how that communication can lead to infrastructure change and process change in organisations. So I think it's not just at Leeds University, it's all academics and it's global. How can we tackle that reliance upon flying and those kind of behaviours, as an example, and how can we communicate the need to change so that people can get on board with that?
I think there'll be general agreement there.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it just speaks to the point that we really have to get the kind of evidence, and that's what we do. Academics, and isn't just evidence from one type of kind of science. It's also from kind of social sciences, and we did kind of learn that during kind of COVID. We did take one type of kind of scientific evidence there. We have to get lots of different perspectives, and that has to be communicated effectively, and it has to be done relatively urgently, because we have to make these decisions and make the choices and give them a try. And that's why I'm keen on the idea we kind of try by doing sort of thing, and we do collect the evidence as we go, and we see how things work, different interventions work, and we kind of take it from there.
I've got a couple of minutes, so I've got two people directly in my line of sight. Madam there. I'm going to go a couple of minutes over, okay? But I think we can. And then could you hand to the woman next to you when you've asked your question? Yeah. I'm going to take the two questions at the same time, okay?
Yeah, so greetings of the day, all the panelists. So since one of the panelists mentioned here that Yorkshire will be pushed into fuel poverty by January 2023. So in that case, what are the immediate solutions on the table in next 2 months? Where in a situation, most of the stakeholders themselves treat climate change still as a soft threat, just because, in climate change, is still treated as a non-traditional security threat, just because the physical force is not being in use. So, so the challenges, what are the solutions?
Question. I'm going to take the second question as well, given the time. And then, panelists, would you like to come back to both questions?
Oh, thank you very much. I just finished my master's a couple of weeks ago. I submitted my thesis on climate change. I hope. So I am an international student from Africa, and I understand there's been a couple of conversations on global and local. So as an international student who comes from Africa, and I know COP is happening in Egypt, I arrived from Bonn yesterday from the UNFCCC yesterday to talk about a couple of things about exchange learning, which I did on personal investigation. I do not know how the university is helping students who have interest in international navigation and, learning beyond just Leeds, but what is around the region as Europe and other countries, including Africa. Do we have programs that do support students who have interest to participate in conferences like the COP? I know I'm going, but I'm going to be self-funding myself. Do we have such resources and, things we can tap into to represent beyond just us, but also as the university? Thank you.
Right, in the last 2 minutes, any thoughts back to the two sets of questions?
Okay, yes. In fact, it's quite a good point to end on, I do think. We talked about ourselves as a kind of city and a kind of region, but we are part of an international kind of global community. And I think the one thing we can do, to get back to your first question, is we can really try and get stories about the impact of climate change that are occurring today, all over the world, in other parts of the world, they're far worse than here. So to bring some of those stories back to this country, to give us the sense that we can't kick it into touch, we can't do it tomorrow, we have to act kind of today, and we have to act urgently. I, in fact, kind of taught my MSc class yesterday for the first time this kind of semester, and I had one student from one from Mongolia, one from Kenya, one from Indonesia, and one from Peru, and what they did translate was all the effects of climate change from their own experience into what we should do about it, and that came across so kind of powerfully. It was such an impetus to do things. So I think that international perspective is so good for us as an institution. And in particular, we have a group of people going out to COP27 in Egypt. We have, in fact, just sitting 2 seats away from you, Harriet is one of our COP experts that have been to countless COPs. And so, absolutely, come and talk to us and be part of that kind of team. We absolutely want to support yourself and everyone in their activities to really get out there and to change the world.
Would anyone else like to respond?
Just to respond to the lady's question about what we're doing about fuel poverty, what is a real privilege in West Yorkshire that we are in a position where we can respond to crises. So in the way that COVID impacted on our community, people came together as a partnership, and now having a mayoralty, we are able to put in swiftly financial support to our local authorities who know their communities. There's a large sum of money going towards our local authorities to support them with warmth, with food, and with mental health support, because we know the next few months are going to be really, really tough. And for those communities, those families that are already struggling, are going to really need support. And also for businesses who have been, I think, missed out of the conversation, small family businesses, SMEs. We have a programme of match funding. I think it's £7,500 as a grant. They match it to green their energy processes, which enables them to save money on their energy bills. So we're intervening, understanding our communities where we can, giving the money to partners who know their communities better to try and stem the flow of desperation over the next few months.
Just very quickly, Yorkshire and Humber Commission
well timed.
Ran special sessions on fuel poverty and the cost of living crisis in June and July, bringing together all the local authorities in the region with people like the Energy Savings Trust and fuel poverty groups. We had a special session last week on retrofitting homes, and there are more coming up. So if you go to our website, there's quite a lot of activity in that space of what the Commission has been up to. And also, just to loop back to previous questions, I hope tomorrow, but certainly in the next few days, the Commission will be publishing a letter to the Prime Minister and to the Secretary of State for Transport and a position statement on the aviation issue, which makes many of the same points as the gentleman with the yellow logo on his jumper made a second ago. So they'll be on our website in the next few days. Well, that is the entire point. Well, not the entire point. It's a large part of what the Commission is all about. In 2 or 3 weeks' time, we're also launching a regional climate action pledge targeted at businesses and organisations across the region to enable them to move forward, not only on net zero, but also on climate resilience and nature and just transitions. So yeah, we're active in that space.
Okay. Would anyone like to make any final comment?
I think it's been an excellent session, and I think maybe next time it would be great to get more from the audience, because there are obviously lots of people with their hands up. So maybe next time we can, or maybe we can remount it very soon.
Well, point absolutely taken. My apologies to those who registered a question. We didn't get to them. I will circulate the questions so people could come back, all right? But I do think, following what Tracy has just said, and also the conversations earlier with, for example, Simone, the Vice-Chancellor, that there's obviously a great deal to talk about. And I think my sense is, certainly chairing this, is there need to be quite a lot of these kinds of conventions going on. They may even need to turn into sort of citizen assembly kinds of actions, and it would be great if the University of Leeds could be a platform for that, working with the West Yorkshire Authority. I think there's an awful lot here. So I'd like to just draw this to an end. There are refreshments now, and do come up to the fore and ask further questions and have further dialogue, because it seems the dialogue now is very, very urgent, particularly because our emotions are quite raw around this. And at the same time, we've got to guide ourselves through as a collectivity of West Yorkshire and be a best practice. And I think that's what we all want, be it that there are some inconsistencies, and I think we're all aware of that. And the phrasing around that is trade-offs, and we need to talk about those trade-offs as well. I'll end there, but just to say thank you all very much indeed for coming. Thank you for the questions, all of you, yeah, and thank you very much you for both what you said and the way in which you interacted with the audience.
Good job, Richard. Very good to the people who have that. Claire as well.